and the Orioles will do whatever the Orioles do. All eyes here in the Charm City, however, on the Ravens. Luke Jones will begin his coverage next week out on the backfields as I get back from giving you the Peter Principles here next week at AM 1570. Man, it's been a little while since I caught up with this guy. I remember the tweet coming out after the Chargers left. He was the longtime Chargers beat writer out in San Diego, and we become friends through our trials and travels and owners' meetings and cold days in Indianapolis at Combines and Super Bowls. We welcome one of our defending champions, one of our favorite beat writers around the nation, Michael Gelkin, back onto the program, the longtime beat writer of the Chargers in San Diego at the Union Tribune. Now, strangely enough, writing in Las Vegas about the Raiders, but living in Oakland. Dude, your story is its own little story. And so before we get to the Raiders or the Chargers, first off, how the hell are you doing? And how's life in Vegas where you're not living but covering football in Oakland and probably packing up bags from San Diego, right?
Yeah, no, things are good. Nice to be on again and talk, Nestor. Yeah, it's been a crazy past year, and you are so focused on just covering the stories about how relocation impacts other people that you kind of forget how relocation can impact yourself. And so here I am, living in Oakland, covering the Raiders, and, a bit of a move from San Diego, but not too difficult or disparative one. And then ultimately, once the Raiders relocate physically to Las Vegas, I will follow them to Southern Nevada.
Did San Diego get like a second or a third in that deal for you when you went up to Oakland?
Yeah, I don't know. It's been quite the experience. You never know how it's going to shake out. And
well, at least you didn't get traded for a compensatory pick, right?
That's true. There might be a writer to be named later. I'm not sure.
A sidebar to be named later. I guess the sidebar in all of this, and, I can introduce you to our audience here as a longtime Chargers beat writer, but as much as you were running around out there at the Canyon and trying to figure out Phillip Rivers and Danny Woodhead and half of those guys that are here now, including Eric Weddle, who I know you knew pretty well, and we've had you on talking about half of our team here. But just in retrospect, and maybe one day you'll write a book or memoirs for your grandkids about this very, very, very strange time in your life. I often talk to Clark Judge and other people about when the Colts started to pack up around here back in 83, 84, that, it really creates sort of this havoc throughout all of it. And I know you've been on my program and in other places and trying to chronicle it as a journalist being in the middle of it. I'm sure you didn't know how this story was going to end for you, but I think we all predicted that the Chargers weren't going to hang around San Diego and there wasn't a stadium there, and Spanos was finally going to get on the greed machine and cash his little check, and now they're playing friggin' football in a soccer stadium. I mean, it's been madness since the last time you and I talked in December, I think.
Yeah, and again, I'm always so focused on giving what I think fans and readers want, which is to hear about the athletes, that I rarely ever put myself into the story. But when it comes to relocation, it is relevant in terms of how many lives it does affect. And, look at my own life. I was 29 when the team moved. I'm 30 now. Not married, no kids, nothing like that. And so you basically this is a fork road in my life.
By the way, it's going to help you when you get to Vegas. Not married, no kids, just so you know.
Yeah. Well, I got a few years. We'll see what changes. But, if you think about it, though, who I marry is probably going to be totally different because I'm going to meet somebody, up here or in Vegas, probably not in San Diego, or just like, the kids I'm going to have. Like, the whole life is kind of just going through its own path because the Chargers relocated and the Raiders relocated. And it's kind of funny how it all shapes out, but I guess that's life.
Well, let's start at the top of all of this. Where does the Vegas-Oakland thing live right now, Mike? I mean, I'm headed over to Europe this week to sort of scout out the Ravens' trip to Jacksonville in September, and it seems like the NFL could play games wherever they want to play. Whether they could play them in a beat-up old 100,000 seat stadium in LA, or they could play them in a soccer stadium, down the street if they want to. The one thing we've never seen them do is try to play play a football game in a place where they've essentially extended a gigantic double middle finger to the people there, to the citizens there, sort of kind of to the fans. And the Raiders fans may be the biggest pirates of all. They've always been sort of this floating pirate ship under Camp Davis to begin with. But when this thing happened, and I was at the owners' meetings back at the Biltmore, and I was talking to Jack Del Rio about it, and apparently the Raiders did a lot of research saying they're not really going to rip the stadium up and rip the seats out or set off bottle rockets or do crazy things in, of all places, the black hole. But we play out there in October, bro. I mean, is the stadium still going to be sitting there? I mean, it really. I'm from a town where we moved our football team and had to go steal one 12 years later. I know how crazy the fans can be. I just can't fathom that this is going to be peaceful in Oakland. I just can't.
I think if the team wins, as it did last year, going 12-4, I think winning can cure a lot of things, and it might just be enough to cure in a short term the in-season stadium atmosphere at Coliseum. Now, people in Oakland are still hurting and upset, as any fan base would be about a team relocating from its area. And as much as I've been able to sense that in my few months living in Oakland now, I do sense there is something different about Raiders fans. Something certainly different between fans who are Raiders fans as opposed to those who were rooting for the Chargers. There was a lot more bitterness, a lot more anger, a lot more "you're dead to us" down in San Diego after the Chargers moved following the 56-year stay in San Diego. It was extremely palpable. Here in Oakland, there are still people, I mean, don't get me wrong, who the Raiders are dead to now. They were diehard fans, but the Raiders just killed whatever allegiance that they had.
Well, dude, that's an interesting argument for the other 31 teams. I mean, if Steve Bisciotti announced his intentions to move the team to Charleston, West Virginia in 2020, I can tell you what, he wouldn't get my PSL money this year and next year. I mean, literally, I think. And I don't know of any other place where they could pull this off. I mean, it's weird if you transport your team into the middle of that, and that's very easy for you to do down in San Diego because you lived through that, and they only moved the team, 100 miles up the freeway. You can get in the car and still be a Chargers fan, and hell, if you lived in Solana Beach or in Del Mar, you know what I mean? It's not that much further, honestly, to remain a Chargers fan, right?
Well, yeah, but I think it's so much more than geography, and you know this. From your San Diego ties, where people in San Diego, Los Angeles
hate LA.
2 hour. Yeah, Los Angeles is a 2 hour drive, but it's a world apart. It's close, but it feels so distant because it's them. And, they're not us. It's them, and it's just to drive up to Los Angeles to watch your team, it's an oxymoron because to be in LA to see your team means it's not your team anymore. And likewise, I've talked to Raiders fans here in Oakland, and a couple of them would tell me, yeah, I'm following, or I am going to follow the team once it moves to Las Vegas. And I say, oh, yeah, why is that? And the Oakland fans would say, well, it's not like they moved to San Francisco. And so even though San Francisco is closer, there's a city versus town theme between San Francisco, people call it the city here, Oakland, the town, so close, divided by a bridge, or connected by a bridge, and still kind of a world apart, maybe to a lesser degree, but pretty close in terms of San Diego to LA. And so there's that dynamic that I think is part of the equation, too, when it comes to relocation and how fans respond to it.
I'm trying to make sense of what Steely Dan probably once called pretzel logic, right? And part of the pretzel logic was the Raiders and the Chargers were getting cozy and pulling the sheets up on a Carson deal to build their own B-League stadium. Jerry comes in, plops down the Rams in, first off, out at the Coliseum, and then soon to be Inglewood, where they're going to build the Taj Mahal West and Jerry's World West out there and do all sorts of things, and including bringing you two there, I'm sure, before it's all over with. But, strangely enough, in the bedfellows of sharing stadiums, Isn't this really a pox on the house of the league itself after all of these years that the 49ers would build that dump down in Santa Clara, the Raiders would make it persona non grata and actually leave the entire market and leave behind their fan base to go to Las Vegas when they easily, somehow, some way, through leadership, which usually means money, that they could have solved this thing 15, 20, 25 years ago by building a Bay Area stadium. And I know same thing with the A's and the Giants, and obviously you could say the same thing about the Redskins and the Ravens and the Colts. If they would have done that in Columbia in 1981 or whatever, everyone would live happily ever after like the Giants and the Jets, right? But egos, money, the leagues, leadership. The way this story was supposed to go for my pals out in St. Louis and Howard Balzer and Bernie Miklas and those guys that cover the team out there, for you in San Diego and you and Kraz and Marty Caswell, all the San Diego people I know down there, as well as for the people in Oakland who've loved the Raiders and been a part of that 3-4 years ago, I don't know that it would have been scripted this way, and I certainly spent a lot of breath, including with Sam Farmer for years and years, talking about it, but the way this thing has worked out, Vegas would have bet against all of this. This was not scripted in any way. This feels like to some degree it was sort of by the seat of the pants, and they followed money. Now, whether the Chargers will ever be a relevant franchise or the Rams in L.A., I think the Raiders have the best deal out of all of it and going to Vegas, and probably financially in the end, maybe it will be the best deal because Mark Davis stole about $1 billion, right?
Yeah, and I think everything you said is so fascinating, just the history of how we got here, and the real question that probably is difficult to answer today. I think if you were to answer today, it's probably hard to be positive about it, but the question is, did the NFL get football in California right, where they had multiple markets with stadium uncertainty? It was a mess. It had been for a while.
They've had 30 years to get it right, like literally, right? They've had 30 years to figure this out, and it's still a cluster kind of, sort of, right?
Yeah, when you look at it right now and look at it today, and I think you use the word dump to describe the brand new state-of-the-art stadium in Santa Clara, and it really is. I mean, it's brand new, and it's green, and there's some good things about it, but unlike the new stadium in Minneapolis, with the Vikings call home now, which is gorgeous and feels like a football stadium, it really is just a wasteland. It's really just bland in Santa Clara. And so there's that, and it's far away from the city of San Francisco. There's San Francisco 49ers, but it feels like there's San Francisco 49ers of Santa Clara, kind of like the Angels of Anaheim. And then you go down in L.A., where really fans wanted most of the Raiders, and the Raiders are the team leaving California, and you have the Chargers, who really there isn't that strong attachment for in the L.A. market yet, and there's so much anger and hurt in San Diego, which really was, obviously the center for that franchise's fan base, and then the Rams are coming, and I think that probably makes as much sense as any of the California attachment in terms of, okay, the Rams in L.A., you can kind of see it, but gosh, that really gutted the people of St. Louis, and
well, they pissed off Raiders fans, they've pissed off Rams fans, they've pissed off Chargers fans, right? And I don't know that they've made anyone's day in L.A., right, at all, right? Like, I don't know that anyone's doing cartwheels in L.A. about all this.
Yeah, it's a mess. It's a mess today. It's going to be really, really interesting to see over the coming years how we view it all. But I do think, you can't say for certain that the NFL in Las Vegas is going to work because we haven't seen it before. We haven't seen a professional sports team there before. The Golden Knights of the NHL are coming this fall, but we haven't really seen what the NFL in Vegas looks like. So we'll have to wait and see. But theoretically, if football in Las Vegas is what the Raiders think it is, you're absolutely right in terms that they could be the real winners in this, or at least Mark Davis could be in terms of when he looks at this. And if Raiders fans still embrace that team, the Raider Nation is such a strong identity among this fan base that really separates them from other teams amid relocation. It's kept a lot of these fans on board. Again, emphasizing that some Raiders fans are checked out completely because of relocation, which is their absolute right when a team moves. But I think it's going to be interesting to see years from now how we view, West Coast football, California, all that, with these relocations, with 3 of them happening in about a 2-year span.
He is Michael Gehlken. You can follow him at Gehlken NFL, and the spelling is Gehlken. A longtime beat writer of the San Diego Chargers, who are now the Los Angeles Chargers. That does not roll off the tongue. He is now living in Oakland and covering the Oakland Raiders, who will be the Las Vegas Raiders, for the Las Vegas Review-Journal. And there will be a quiz on this a little later on in the segment, but you can follow him at Gehlken NFL out on Twitter. Now, you're chasing the Raiders around. You're chasing Jack Del Rio around. As we know here in Baltimore, that sort of stagger year after your quarterback leaves in the middle of the season on a gurney, even in a good year, boy, they're only going to go as Carr is going to go. They're only going to go as his rehab goes. Jack Del Rio certainly has his hands full, right? I mean, off the expectations and where the franchise is and the anger of the fan base and all of that that's going into that, plus the retooling of the whole division. And no one knows the Chargers better than you, but I think the Chargers can win 8 or 9 games this year for sure. I know Denver's still trying to figure it out, as are the Chiefs, who've had their own a series of turmoil internally. Jeremy Maclin being on our sidelines in purple as well. It's a mess out there, but the Raiders are expected to win 12 games, right? I mean, like literally, there's a huge amount of expectation on a franchise that has a quarterback that, wasn't upright the last time that they played.
Yeah, there is a ton of expectation here, and I think that's part of what excites me most about covering the Raiders is they're a good team. They're going to be a good team for a while, and forget for a moment the Las Vegas and Oakland and the relocation, all that storyline. That's certainly something that's important and worth watching and writing about. But just from a team standpoint, the personnel here, you look at Derek Carr, Gabe Jackson, 2 guys that just re-signed the monster extensions, Gabe Jackson being their right guard. And then you have Khalil Mack, the AP Defensive Player of the Year, defending Amari Cooper, who's going into his 3rd year, and he's still so young. There's the arrow. It's clearly pointing up on the Raiders, and I think it's part of what's the appeal for everyone surrounding the organization. For the Raiders fans here in Oakland, can the Raiders win the Super Bowl before they leave? In Las Vegas, boy, it does seem like we're going to get a pretty good team in 2020 or 2021. And then just that locker room, there's just a confidence under Jack Del Rio, a culture that's changed as Reggie McKenzie seems to hit on all these draft picks in free agency acquisitions. So it's I think everyone in the AFC West knows that the Raiders aren't just coming, but they're here. And they proved that last year before Derek Carr went down in Week 16. Now, look around the AFC West, and it's also clear that the Raiders are going to have plenty of competition. And I think the Chiefs, you feel better about the Chiefs and the Chargers from a quarterback standpoint. The Chargers certainly can have a winning record this year, even though they went 5-11 last year after a 4-12 campaign if they stay healthy. And then the talent's clearly there. This is a very good division. It's going to be interesting to see how it unfolds.
Well, you've been watching this for years from down in San Diego, where the weather is better than Oakland, but you already knew that. Although I do love the Bay Area. I mean, congratulations on getting that gig. It could have been worse. You could be in like Sacramento or something. But for you down there with the Chargers and covering them and being intimately familiar with all of that, how is that going to go in your mind with Phillip Rivers and with the players didn't want to leave, coach, nobody wanted, the fans didn't want him to leave, and yet they packed up the canyon a couple of weeks ago, and I saw all the video, and Clark Judge came on and talked to me about his years there and your years there covering the team. How do you see that going for the Chargers and sort of the weirdness of all of it? Because no one's ever tried to play football in a soccer stadium 100 miles from their home and not really have a fan base to speak of at this point.
I think there's a divide between how San Diego views relocation and how those in the Chargers organization, certainly in the locker room, view it. Obviously, people in San Diego were disturbed and upset and all of those negative emotions when the Chargers left. It was pretty pure. Maybe some people are saying good riddance, but largely the fans who've been following the team closely for some cases decades were really hurt when that happened. People in the locker room, you got to remember that they haven't been in that locker room or in that city for decades. I mean, a lot of those guys are brand new, and Phillip Rivers is Antonio Gates' of that locker room are pretty rare, where they spent, all of their careers in San Diego. And for a lot of those guys in that locker room, I would say the vast majority, there's some sense of relief that the Chargers were moving. Just like there would have been relief if the Chargers were staying. Just a resolution of knowing one way or the other that the Chargers, what their home is going to be, where their family, their wives and their kids, what kind of schools they can get, just to know that, okay, for the foreseeable future, this is where I will be living if I'm a part of this team. And that does a lot for a locker room. I think the uncertainty at times was a distraction, certainly the 2015 season, maybe less so in 16. By that point, I think it was a little bit more, guys were just a little bit more jaded by it.
Yeah, but nobody was carrying that burden more than like Rivers and when Weddle was there, the guys who were the leaders and the guys that were there for the longest period of time, right?
Yeah, Weddle put everything into it. I mean, Weddle was as emotional of a guy in terms of just showing love to San Diego. You saw that in the Week 16 game. It was thought to be maybe the final home game in Qualcomm Stadium history, final NFL game in San Diego history, and Eric's out there for more than an hour post-game, taking pictures, signing autographs, collapsing at midfield, with his back to the grass, which is the white painted decal of the helmet. There was so much emotion in 2015, and Eric was a big part of that because he really captured the attachment that existed between fans and the team. But in most cases, there wasn't that sense of attachment among players toward the city just because of the realities of the NFL, where it's a transaction-driven league, and you're with one team one week and another the next for some guys in that locker room. So it's just a different type of deal. But, San Diego in the Chargers, it's there's that divide there that I think there was a lot of relief when the relocation did happen.
Can Danny Woodhead still play? We're wondering that around here in Baltimore. We've, imported a couple of these Chargers guys, and, Weddle was part of the hospitality committee around here as well.
I'll tell you what. There's certain times when you're covering a team, it's your job to cover a team, and a player on that team you cover goes to another market, another team, and you have to speak on the radio about that player, about, okay, this is the kind of guy you guys are getting, the kind of guy that I've covered. And sometimes the guy that I might be talking about, a new player for that market, you kind of tiptoe around it. You want to say, you don't want to, you want to capture things and accurately, but you're only going to go so far when you're talking about the caliber of player it is, the caliber of person it is. When talking about Eric Weddle, when talking about Danny Woodhead, I could spend 45 minutes to an hour. You just give me your whole show. I could fill multiple hours talking about the caliber of players and people that both those guys are. And I think you saw it with Eric Weddle quite clearly in terms of the type of player that he is and still is, last season. And Danny Woodhead, when healthy, there's no doubt what he can do. He's made every single team better that he's been on. You see the impact that he has and what quarterbacks, what he does for quarterbacks, not just from check down type of mode, but just from the mental standpoint, the trust, the protection. He just gets it, and he's still got the athleticism to beat a linebacker one-on-one and to be a mismatch. And his route tree, he can pretty much do it all. Wheel route, whatever it would be that you'd have in mind as a quarterback or an offensive coordinator, Danny Woodhead can do it. Coaches love having Danny Woodhead. They love having Eric Weddles, and the Ravens have them both. So they're doing a pretty good job of not just signing ex-Chargers, but they're signing the right one. Those are two really good people to have on the field and in your locker room.
Michael Gelkin will be out with another good man, Jack Del Rio, covering all things Raiders all year long for the Las Vegas Review-Journal in advance of the Raiders moving to the Diamond in the Desert in Sin City. You can follow Michael at Gelkin NFL. That's Gehlken. My friend, Week 5, we have a little Bay Area excursion out there, and if I'm not sipping wine up in Sonoma, you and I will be bending an elbow with some margaritas out in the Richmond district of San Francisco. I'm looking forward to our big trip out there, and I'm really looking forward to sort of the wackiness of what might be an emotional last appearance for me at the Oakland Coliseum for football as well. This might be the Ravens' last trip out to the black hole this year.
You're right. We'll have to make the most of it. Can't wait to see you.
All right, man. As long as maybe the baseball field will be gone by the time we get there in October, but I think the A's will be eliminated by then. Great having you on, Mike.
Likewise.
You got it. Michael Gehlken. He is GEHLKEN NFL out on Twitter and at the reviewjournal.com out in Las Vegas. He's picked up his life and moved around. Chargers to Carson, Gehlken to Oakland, and a sports writer to be named later. I am Nasty at WNST.net. That is my email. I am, much like Mr. Angelos, a very available individual. Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, Snapchat, Instagram, streaming live on our Facebook as well as our YouTube WNSTV channel. Don't forget the Peter Principles, chapters 9, 10, 11, released online next week for your reading pleasure. I'll also be doing the books on audio version of that in the Buy a Toyota Audio Vault next week, but we'll also be airing it next week as my wife and I take a little downtime for our 14th wedding anniversary. We're going to be advancing all things Londinium for our September 21st excursion to the UK with the Ravens. The Ravens leaving the tower. It should be pretty good. I am Nestor. We are WNST.net, AM 1570, and WNST Towson, Baltimore, and we never stop talking Baltimore sports.